Hello and welcome to The Slowdown. I'm so pleased to be back with season 5 of this podcast. Thank you for listening. If you could do just one thing for me, it would be to like, subscribe, and review this episode or the podcast, depending on what platform you're listening on. It really does help. And of course, share this episode with a friend you think needs to hear it. I'm doubly pleased that this season is also sponsored by a sustainable swim and resort wear brand I absolutely love called Keone. Founded by two extraordinary women in Athens, I actually wanted to interview them for an episode, but they really wanted all of my guests to be on board. So, and because it's my podcast and I design it how I want, rather than a repeated ad in each episode of this season, I'm sharing 8 short bespoke stories about the brand instead for you to get to know them a bit more. When I was thinking about this new season, I reflected on how much of modern life is about adding credentials, followers, achievements, building an identity out of accumulated things. But what if the path back to yourself isn't about adding anything at all? What if it's about stripping away and returning? Today, I spoke to Rollo Skinner, British artist, author, and botanical set designer. Rollo tried to embrace big city life and took a series of self-described wrong turns in his 20s, and only began a floristry work experience at the age of 30, eventually finding his way back to the natural corner of the world where he grew up. And that return changed everything. He spends his time in a shepherd's hut on family land and has grown a practice that spans illustration, painting, botanical installations, and set design, working with the likes of Gucci, Mulberry, Barbour, and the legendary fashion photographer Tim Walker. He's also published a debut illustrated fable about queerness and self-acceptance. We talk about what it means to recreate yourself, why so many of us abandon the parts of ourselves that actually make us whole, and how the natural world became both his biggest inspiration and his anchor. Recorded at Brazen Studios and sponsored by swim and resort wear brand Keone, I hope you enjoy this episode with Rollo Skinner. Hi Rollo, welcome to The Slowdown. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'd like to start first with your childhood. It's always a place that I like to begin because I think it provides context. So I'm curious, where were you raised, by whom, and what were your kind of early examples or understandings of success?
Okay, so I was raised on the Wiltshire-Dorset border by my mum and dad, and I guess, my 2 brothers. I was the middle of 3 boys, and we grew up in an old farmhouse. And I guess in a way, as much as I was raised by the family, I was very much raised by the natural world around me and by the trees and by the landscape. Was very, very formative for me growing up. It was my refuge. And I guess my definition of success from a young age was just slog it and, just punish yourself until you achieve the thing. And it's all in the achievement. It's not in the process. It's all in the accolade, the thing that you can achieve. And yeah, this real kind of exhausting grind mentality somehow imprinted into me at a young age, as I'm sure it does into so many of us. But it's kind of mad that from a young age, the way I approached exams was just like slog away, like squeeze every last drop of effort out of myself to be able to achieve the thing that I'm trying to achieve.
Do you think it was unusual that you were so connected to the natural world? Like, were your brothers also like that? Did you play in the woods a lot? Or were you kind of the kid at school that was like unusually connected to nature?
I think sort of somewhere in the middle of all of that, I think I would I was that weird kid at school because I would like go off, behind the trees and write little poems to birds, whilst also managing to kind of maintain this quite good, facade of, being able to kind of just about fake it enough to be able to fit in so that people didn't think I was a complete weirdo, but then having this kind of very private part of myself that would want to go off and retreat, I guess, into natural spaces. I think I do have a very, I guess, green-fingered family. You know, my dad is a big gardener. My mum really, loves flowers. My grandmother was a apple farmer and a fruit farmer, and my other grandmother was an incredible gardener. So I think it's there, but for me, it was very dormant for many years. I was given a tiny little flower bed behind the house, and it was north-facing, and it was like filled with rocks, and it was really a very difficult place to grow things. And I was given it, I think maybe when I was like 6, I was like allowed to have this little space. And I put, everything sort of died that went in there. I think eventually just these like few ferns and some hellebores survived. I think I tried to grow like a mulberry bush in there that some kind of godparent gave me, which just, I think, perished. And actually, something I really loved growing up was every year, the like local village fair, there were kind of different categories, people are entering in like, the wonkiest piece of fruit or whatever, the wonkiest vegetable they've grown. And for kids, there was this category of making these miniature gardens in tea trays. Mm. And, I became really obsessed with it every year. And I would put like these little forget-me-nots in there, like these tiny little blue flowers, and then have tin foil as the kind of pond and little things of moss and primroses. And yeah, I think I don't really know why why am I telling you that story?
I guess it shows that as a child, you were really interested and fascinated in this stuff in a way that some people might be in, like reading on their own or being super social or being into sports. Like clearly this wasn't just the context of where you were living, that you were so physically connected to nature, but it seems like there was just an interest in this from a really young age.
Completely. And I think I really, I grew up gay and still am. And really, it was so hard. It's incredibly hard trying to fit into a world that isn't really designed for you. And, in the 90s, thinks you're absolutely, abhorrent just by being. I really found it. I found it so hard to fit into the human world, and both at school and at home, because all of my natural instincts were wrong or like deemed wrong by society. Even at 7, you can always tell if there's like a 7-year-old is gay. Like it's sort of, it shows, within their character and the way they react to things. And it's so wonderful. It's so amazing. And at that time, it was not seen as amazing. It was seen as something people would be very ashamed of. And so for me, I just found that I would kind of always trip up in kind of social situations and not really understand what I was doing wrong, but know that fundamentally there was something very flawed about me that people found uncomfortable and difficult. And so really for me, nature became this incredible refuge. And I was very, very fortunate that I grew up in this old farmhouse, and we have, where my parents still live today. And we have this long strip of trees, which we call the woods, but really it's sort of a strip of trees that is kind of crushed between 2 arable fields between us and the neighbouring farmer. And that for me was this real refuge as a child. And I would spend so much time there watching, in a way, you asked me these questions like, was I aware of that being kind of different? But I thought that everyone was doing that. Everyone was going into nature and really studying and watching the natural world as it kind of grows and moves and shifts and changes around you. I felt incredibly safe there. And obviously that's an incredible luxury. A child can't just go off into any old wood and feel incredibly safe watching the natural world. But I was very fortunate. I did have this little cocoon of space to go to. I found it hard both at home and at school. My nervous system was so in a defense mode all the time. And the defense was, stick a big happy grin on my face and be as lovely and nice and easy as I can be, just to stop any, just to stop upsetting the world, you know, not to stop like the wrath of the world turning on me.
Yeah, because you're like, I'm already in my sexuality and my choices upsetting the world.
Completely. And at that time, I had no idea that it was because I was gay.
Right.
But it was just, I just felt fundamentally like I was this weirdo, you know, people just thought I was weird. And like my natural instincts were a bit weird. Like they weren't, you know, but I'd love to dress up as a girl, you know, I'd love to like be Cinderella in the school play, you know, and like flash my knickers to the entire school. Like I had so much joy in that. And yeah, obviously that's such fodder to be absolutely rinsed by your classmates. And then my elder brother was so embarrassed by me all the time. And we were always at the same school. And he was just, you know, mortified by my presence. If I like came and said like, oh, hey, at school, if I kind of went up to him, he was, you know, his heart, you know, you'd see his heart sink. And that's just like a horrible feeling to have day in, day out for all of your life, really.
It sounds like we're starting at this kind of bifurcation of your life of like the nature side that is like joyous and childlike, and then the realities of the world and things that you have to step into, academic, and then going out into the world of work. And you describe your 20s as kind of a series of wrong turns. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, what was the first wrong turn? And did it feel wrong at the time, or is it just when you look back in hindsight?
I mean, I think, you know, there were so many wrong turns in my teens. You know, I should never have been at an all-boys boarding school, right. You know, like that was really difficult. But I guess, you know, when I had my own agency, my first, you know, I always see it as a wrong turn. But of course, all of those, every decision I've made has got me to, you know, sit here talking to you right now. So they're all learning along the way, and, you know, it's the journey. But yeah, so I loved drawing growing up. That was really like a very evident skill that I had, was drawing and art. And but I also loved acting, but it didn't perhaps come as naturally to me. Or it did if I was playing Cinderella. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think I could have made a fabulous drag queen, but I was always cast in these quite like straight roles, or these quite like young romantic lead roles. And I ended up we were doing Les Miserables at school, and the musical, because I can sing. That's one of my favorite things to do in the world is sing. And there was a casting director came, and they saw me and said, told you know, one of the members of staff that I should go to drama school and should apply to drama school. And I was so malleable at that point, and I really had no sense of who or what I wanted to do or who I was at all. And so I was like, right, well, obviously I'll go and do what this person has said. Like, I trust this other person's view of me better than I trust listening to my own innate instincts, and what I want to do. And I think also there was probably a part of me that had so much unprocessed emotion, like so many tears that I wanted to cry. And I think, you know, going to drama school is a wonderful place to go and be out kind of gay person who's able to, you know, go and cry in a room. I very quickly realized that to work in the industry, it's mad now because, you know, here we are 10, 15, 20 years later, you know, every straight actor is playing gay. You know, it's so like, it's the coolest thing to be queer But at the time it was really not. And so I kind of came out of drama school, and my agent, the first thing he said to me was, you know, I don't want to know if you're gay. Don't tell me. So that was kind of horrible. And then I proceeded to have like lots of these very difficult things. But I was very fortunate that I was cast in. I kept on getting jobs, and so I was able to, through doing the job, which coincidentally one of them was called Wrong Turn 6, and
wow.
It's, you know, the 6th film in one of the longest running horror franchises. It's a slasher gore film. I was playing like the main guy's best friend. I was like this little American journalist. It's 20th Century Fox, so it's like a very legitimate thing. But
I hate gore. Did they like chop your head off?
Gore. They these mutant hillbilly cannibals hogtied me, caught me in the woods, tied me up into a tree, and then someone like came out of this like hut and he was going, it's like this terrifying man with this like horrible, like really long nose and this massive machete came out of this log cabin and gutted me and like gored me. And I was so scared because, you know, when you hear about those awful stories of, you know, the gun being switched on, you know, the film set, I suddenly thought,
right, what if that
machete has been switched for a real one? And he then gored me. And it was so I really screamed for my life. It was just like the most appalling.
And they were like, this is great take.
They were really like, this is great. And I was like, that's the best thing I've ever done in my life.
Fear.
And then these children come out, these like mutant hillbilly children come out of this cabin and all eat my entrails. And then someone has sex underneath my body.
Oh, wow.
So there we go. So
I guess, but what's interesting to me there is like this notion of you go down a wrong path, but you still get booked on the jobs. So it's very difficult because you're going, but I'm achieving in society's idea of success. I'm making money, I'm booked and busy, I'm doing things, I'm a jobbing actor, but I'm not in my purpose, not doing anything that I really love.
Totally. Yeah, it was very incremental. You know, it really took a while and a lot of, you know, I had to really gather a lot of evidence to be like, okay, no, this is not the right thing for me. But it was like, you know, the promise of the thing to come and you're kind of you're building on this thing. You invested so much time into it. You know, you trained to do this. And also that thing of like anyone else would kill for this opportunity. And so feeling so guilty that you're not actually enjoying it when you're experiencing it. It all came to a head when I was filming this TV show called The White Princess, and it had Jodie Comer in it, and it was the War of the Roses, and I was playing the head of the Royal Tudor stables, the Tudor Royal stables. I don't know how quite how to say that, but you know, as the stable boy, but the slightly Machiavellian stable boy, and it was the most dreamy gig because I got to ride the Lloyd's TSB horses across the great British countryside throughout the entire summer. And it was kind of 6 months of filming. And I would, you know, I was very in and out. You know, I was just doing a kind of, you know, come in for a day. But I was filming at like, you know, Arundel Castle and Cardiff Castle and these beautiful places. But anyway, it was during filming that I was like, okay, this is my dream, to be riding these beautiful horses. I should say I'd also been diagnosed with Lyme disease when I was 21, which has been a whole thing within my family. And so I was kind of I was struggling a lot internally with health things. And for me, it was largely anxiety. It was health anxiety. And I was filming this TV show and I was just so terrified. Every time I'd leave my trailer, I'd be so terrified of walking on set and delivering my lines in front of people because I was also just like struggling with this internal battle, so anxious about my health. I realized, right, this is my dream gig and I'm not happy at all. I'm like actually so far from being happy. I'd applied to this school called the School of Communication Arts, which was in Brixton. It's like a tiny little school. And I somehow I found out I'd managed to get into it because I just knew I was so envious of all of the set design people, the prop people, the florists, the lighting people, you know, anyone who's helping craft the visual world and tell that wider visual story. I felt like I had that to offer within myself. I thought, God, I really could do that. But I kept on suppressing it within every job. But it was on this job that I was really like, no, Rollo, you've got to listen to that feeling. So I found out I got into the school, I applied, it all happened quite quickly. And I was still filming the show at the time. And so I went out, and because I was wearing a wig and I had this like long golden hair and it was like glued onto my head essentially, it meant I could go and shave my head for the first time since leaving drama school, because they always say, you know, never shave your head.
Right, you look different,
exactly,
your cards.
Totally, you've got to keep your, you know, hair.
Look the same.
You've got to look the same. That's so restrictive, especially being queer and like wanting to kind of inhabit my queer identity, but also being told you can't be gay by literally everyone within the industry. I then went out and shaved my head, and I walked back into my flat and I was feeling so elated because I was like, oh my God, I'm claiming my future for myself. I can go and go to this kind of creative school and go and, just be myself. And my phone rang and it was my agent. And he was like, oh my God, Rollo, congratulations, you've done it. You've been cast as the lead in a Netflix show. And the show was called Free Rein. And it was all about horses. And it was basically like Pony Club, the TV show. And it was for 13-year-old girls. And I literally felt like I'd been shot through the stomach. I was like, this is the worst possible news. And I was kind of gasping for air on the phone, being like, yeah, okay. And even then I was still like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll do it. Just, my soul utterly destroyed. And I guess why was I so feeling like that was because I was going to have to again play this, I was 25 at the time and I was going to have to be playing this 15-year-old, romantic interest for a kind of 13-year-old girl. And so I was going to basically have to go fully back into the closet to do this. And it would then, that thing of being like, at that time, if an actor was suspected of being gay, it was like front page news, like, oh my God.
You don't get GQ Man of the Year award.
Exactly. You're just like the laughing stock. And I was like, I don't want to be I just don't want to be that, but I want to go and be myself.
But then why didn't you feel like you could say no?
Well,
the expectation, and your agents worked so hard too. Totally, you don't want to let them down.
Totally. And just thinking, right, I think I was just like, right, it's 3 months. I can do it. And it was good money. And then an hour went by and I was just in such a gloom. And then suddenly the phone calls again. He's like, great news. It's for 3 seasons. And I'm just sorting out the contract now. And I'm like, I can't do it. That was the moment that I was like, I can't do this. And he obviously completely imploded. And it was a horrible conversation. The first of a few horrible conversations where I had to continually be like, no, I'm not going to be an actor anymore. I sort of needed this kind of quite climactic end, I think. I don't know why. But, I needed to be able to say say a full no to the real deal, as it were, And I at the time was like, if this show is really successful, I have to be okay with saying no to this, knowing that this show could possibly be really successful. And I had a really strong instinct that it would be really successful. And it was an incredibly successful show for Netflix. It was like their number one tween show for 3 years. It was like a major show. And look.
But then you would be that guy.
Completely. And, that guy has now got nearly 1 million followers on Instagram and, is doing very, very well. And I'm so pleased because that was his.
But that's the thing. Is it his dream? If he wanted that, to be doing something you don't really want to be doing and have 1 million followers of tweens that you know?
Completely. You're at the top of the wrong ladder. He actually also met his wife on that show. So I'm, could not have been more perfect. That he went and did that, that I didn't take that job. So then I went to the school and I was free. And it felt like the first time where me, who I am, wasn't being put under the microscope for people to kind of analyze and say yes or no.
And what were you learning?
So I went into the school thinking it was going to be a very entrepreneurial focus. It was all quite kind of smoke and mirrors, the school, to get into it. It was like in an old nightclub in the top of the church in Brixton. The nightclub was called Mass. The principal of the school's office was in the DJ booth. It was so sort of renegade and kind of freeing and exactly what I needed to go and do. But I went into it on the kind of understanding that I was going to be kind of slipstreamed into this kind of entrepreneurial thing. And they took in kind of 24 people in a year. And normally how it was divided was you'd have 1 or 2 people who went into the entrepreneurial thing. And then kind of the other remainders would all be focusing on advertising. And it was basically a year's speed dating for creatives for advertising. Mm-hmm. So the way that a creative team works for advertising is you've got the copywriter and the art director. And so the two of you are paired together traditionally in kind of traditional advertising creative departments. And somehow I suddenly found myself slightly again, in this in this speed dating for creatives, doing something I actually didn't really want to do. I didn't want to go and work in advertising. But it hadn't really been very clear to me. And to be honest, I'm sure I could have, had a few more conversations before saying yes to the school.
But you were 25 and you were like, design.
I need an answer. Exactly. Anything but this, anything but anything but acting. And I need it to be, exactly, something design based. But it was an amazing year in many ways. It was so intense, and it was such an incredible grind. And we were really, it was the most kind of, the grindiest grind there is. It was just like, go. And there was constantly like this leaderboard of, who was on top and who was like the second and third teams. And it was really hard, but I did also really enjoy it. And I think it taught me a lot about how to have ideas and how to kind of shape creative ideas. And I went in as an art director, but then there was always a kind of question mark around whether I'd be a copywriter. But then I eventually found my lovely partner, creative partner, Miranda, and the two of us then formed this creative team. And we were then hired out of there in a very small startup, advertising agency. This was right when kind of social purpose marketing had really kind of taken off. And the idea of this agency was to work with brands like, Budweiser, Adidas, Mars, to help to make the world a better place, ultimately. Went into it very, excited. And it was an amazing environment to work, very, very smart people. But it was also incredibly hard work and such a slog. I really, really struggled. I kind of managed, also because I was in a team dynamic, and Miranda was so kind of relaxed and like at ease in that environment and so brilliant. And so she kind of, propped me up, I think. I stayed much longer because of her, ultimately. And because I loved lots of people there. But I really, really kind of struggled. And I was also in a very, very difficult relationship at that time, which was very subtly controlling and increasingly. And it was really robbing me of my confidence and of my agency and of my self-worth. I was like scraping the barrel of who I was, and I was exhausted. I was really like burning myself out because I had no escape. I had no respite. I didn't have, the woods of my childhood to retreat to.
You were in London.
I was in London, and I was just knackered and so stressed. And I reached a point where I actually stopped taking the tube because I was just I became terrified that I was going to throw myself in front of it. Not because I was feeling suicidal, but because I just had these incredibly intrusive thoughts. And I think that's just, I guess, like a symptom of being utterly burnt out, isn't it? I didn't trust myself, and I was just, it was a very, 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 very low point.
It sounds like in spite of the learnings that you got from that experience, it was like another wrong turn, as you would describe it. Was it that you started to realize, as so many of us did, that all of these campaigns were a lot of greenwashing for a lot of big brands? So there was also like a disillusionment factor. Like, what were the elements that came together? Or was it just a burnout that made you, again, say, I have to say no?
It was all of those things.
Okay.
Definitely disillusionment with the industry. It was working on this PepsiCo brief where we were, we were having to research recycling, and PepsiCo were wanting to kind of come out as these big champions, these leaders within the world of recycling. And at the same time, they were just pumping out this plastic into the world. And when we were then pitching all of our ideas, things that were actually genuinely trying to help make a kind of positive impact and reduce the amount of plastic that they used. And they didn't want to have any of it, and you were suddenly like, wait, okay, this is actually greenwashing. And I think I was also just inhabiting this like digital world, and I was going to bed so late, I was staying up on my laptop so late every night and getting up so early to make sure that I could kind of do all this like massive routine of yoga and things just to make sure I was in a, relaxed headspace to be able to survive the day. And I was really searching for something. I was like, something has got to change and I don't know what the hell it is. And I was reading lots of different self-help books at that time. I was really like looking, there's got to be a better answer than this. And I was really examining this question of like, what did I love doing as a child was just the thing. I was like, I know that somewhere along the way, I took a wrong turn from a path as a little boy. Where was that wrong turn? Like, how far back can I trace myself back up that path to find something that I genuinely remember I loved doing, before the noise of school. And I thought back to those little fairy gardens, I thought back to just being in nature. And I went and bought these tulips for £4, and I came home and I sat down with them, and it just felt so good. Like, I felt so giddy, just the fact that I'd actually bought myself something to have a play. I didn't even have colouring pencils or paints. Like I didn't spend any money on my own enjoyment. And so I started to play with these flowers, and it was just a really wonderful feeling. And I thought, God, this is so uplifting and peaceful and quiet. And I felt so connected, I guess, back to that little boy who loved being in the woods and loved getting mud into my nails and being messy and dirty and free. And I loved the messiness of it. It's messy, like working with flowers and the leaves and just this tactile thing with my hands. I'd been spending so long tapping away on computers. And that was, a big shift for me, because I was, suddenly like, right, okay, there is this whole dormant part of myself that I really now need to uncover. And so it was the flowers, and then I got, colouring pencils and started kind of drawing and scribbling away. I suddenly was like, right, I want to go do like a little day's flower course, and I'm going to take the day off work, which I'd never done for like something just for myself, And it was so amazing. And it felt so radical to allow myself to have a day off work. Like, it was mad. And then cut to this, 2 weeks later, the world goes into lockdown, COVID. And it was very fortunate timing for me, because, I was really had reached this like complete burnout, and I was exhausted, and I'd suddenly discovered this little thing. And I found myself back at my mum and dad's. Had
you been furloughed?
Exactly, I was furloughed. I'd go to the woods and just kind of play with flowers and kind of and twigs and things, and kind of bring them back and make these little sculptures on the kitchen table for my family to kind of bring a bit of, light and levity to that time. And I became really kind of obsessed with it. And I was so fortunate to be furloughed, because it just gave me this space where I was actually being paid to experiment and play with no real, I didn't have to show it to anyone. And it was so luxurious. And so when I came back to London, on Saturdays, I would go and work at the local florist and kind of make bouquets and then do my job, the other 5 days a week. And so it was a slow transition. It wasn't just an instant, I'm quitting my job, I'm out of here. It was this kind of, this shift that took probably the course of like a year and a bit.
How did it feel to be a beginner again? Because I suppose this is the second time that you've left kind of a successful part in your career and you're trying to learn something again.
So I just turned 30. I broke up with the boyfriend, and it felt like this kind of giddying new lease of life. And I'd also started going to therapy. I was healing, all aspects of myself. So I had so much energy. And I was so kind of hungry and excited by this new thing. It was very hard to find work. It was very hard to find people to assist, because there were no events at the very beginning. And I knew I didn't want to work in a shop. I actually hated working in a flower shop and making bouquets. It was soul destroying. I'm just like so sensitive. I have to find the exact right thing. So I knew it was flowers, but I knew I wanted to make big scale things.
Did botanical set designer exist in your consciousness as a role? Like, did you know that was a job?
No, God, no. No, before that, not at all, But I think, in all of this kind of introspection, I'd sort of kept on coming back to this idea that making big sets with flowers, I was like, it's so niche, but I just think I can just feel absolutely that that's something I'd love to do. And I don't really know how or where I can do that, or, who else is doing that. And I kept on asking people if I could assist them. And they kept on being like, we're so sorry, we don't have any work. We're allowed like 2 people on the team. And so I ended up going to a place called the London Flower School, which had a 4-week course. And there I really learned how to make things at scale. I just think I'm good at spatial design. Feels quite innate to me. For the first time, it's like, yes, this is it. I can do this. This is my thing. And then I kind of came out of that, and I was just so fortunate because I had this grounding there. And because of my advertising experience and connections, I just, my first job was to do a music video for Arlo Parks. And, which is terrifying to think that would be your first job. But it was so exciting. And they wanted tons of sunflowers and tons of delphiniums. And just after I'd clicked order to buy them, they
changed the brief.
They changed the brief, literally. And then they were like, we're so sorry. And I'm like, I'm so sorry because I can't cancel that order. And so then they were like, okay, well, do you want to keep the flowers? So then I had this like £1,000 worth of sunflowers and delphiniums coming to my mum and dad's house. So then I made this installation in the greenhouse, and then that was became this kind of calling card. That was like my first like proper thing that I could be like, that I've made that. And then from that, I just started to get like amazing jobs coming in. So it was really mad. It was mad, yeah.
Chione was co-founded by Lydia Vusvuni and Emilia Thorodoropoulou, 2 women in their 30s, both mothers, both Greek, both deeply in love with their country and its craftsmanship. What they've built together in just a few years is extraordinary. A brand now recognized across Greece and internationally, loved by celebrities, featured in major press, and even worn on screen in a Yorgos Lanthimos film. And they say they continue their journey with the same enthusiasm with which they began. That's the thing about building something from genuine love rather than just ambition. The enthusiasm doesn't run dry. When I look for partners for the slowdown, these are the kinds of stories I want to be able to tell. So I was overjoyed when they wanted to be our partner for season 5. Their support pays for this studio and our amazing production and editing team and keeps this podcast going. But there's also something in it for you. Chione are offering a 20% discount to the Slowdown listeners. Just use the code THESLOWDOWN, one word, at checkout on their website, chione.com, for 20% off your first shop. I hope you check them out and support this female-founded brand the way that they are supporting this show. And you've worked with, as you say, Gucci, Mulberry, Barbour, Tim Walker, the photographer. Is there any particular job that comes out to you now as like a great example of the kind of thing that you love to do?
So I did a job with Tim Walker. It was the day after Glastonbury. And I was at Glastonbury. And it was with Alexa. I'd only been asked 2 weeks before. And I was like, I'm not going to not go to Glastonbury because of this. So I'm going to make it all work. And, I made it all work. And, on the Sunday of Glastonbury, I was like driving back via my parents' house to cut loads and loads of like flowers to make this massive, massive bouquet for Alexa Chung to stand in this allotment in Stratford for Barbour. And I love that image because it's so kind of uplifting and kind of glorious and wild. And I feel it really kind of captures my style of, I love abundance and natural things that have grown in the UK that feel really real and kind of, but also kind of whimsical and and also there's a kind of melancholy to it as well, which I find very, very beautiful. So yeah, that image I will be very pleased with when I die, but they're all great jobs.
You mentioned there a couple of times, obviously doing a lot of this stuff back at your parents' house, and you effectively lived or moved back for a period of time to your parents' house with your sheepdog in a cabin on family land. Western capitalism's idea of success would say that that's actually a failure, that that's like a step back from what you should be achieving. Where do you stand with that? This kind of concept of returning, not being so popular, but you did it anyway, because I feel we've gone sideways as a society, like that, leaving our parents, not investing back in the land that we came from, not continuing to build together, focusing so much on individualism and kind of going off and doing better than the generation before, has left an entire generation behind, and homes behind, and land behind. And so I'm just wondering if you felt a level of, oh, other people will see this as like me backtracking, but actually this is how I see it.
I absolutely love what you've just said. Like, I've never really thought of it like that. And it's so true. And it is so mad, isn't it, that we all just kind of completely continue to kind of fracture and splinter away from before. Whereas, you know, if you go back thousands of years, we would have absolutely stayed in that kind of, you know, group, that unit, or within the same area. Yeah, for me, I think it was just that I realized how much importance and kind of significance to me that little bit of land had to the child me, and how much I needed to be near it. And, you know, I'm not at a point where I want to be buying my own home in the countryside. You know, I've got my flat in London, and I've spent, you know, quite a lot of the gravity of my life is up here with work, and but there was a part of me that's yearning to be back there by those woods and to be close to my family. You know, at this point where my parents are getting older, my nephews and nieces are all live down there, my brothers, you know, all my family down there. But I didn't want to have my own home. And so it just made so, you know, we've got this field, and it's an old agricultural field that's been very overfarmed for many years. And actually the field has always made me feel very sad. I've always felt very depressed by that field because it's just heavy clay soil. It's been really overfarmed. The land is knackered, and there's so much water surface runoff, and it's very depleted, and you feel it. And a year ago, it stopped being farmed, and it's been sown over with wildflowers. And I see so much of myself in that field, you know, and so my shepherd's hut has arrived 6 months ago. Although, you know, over the winter, I've been slow to get curtains and that sort of thing. So I've not had lots of nights sleeping in there yet. But as we come into spring now, I'm got a lot more time there.
Did you compare yourself at all to peers your age that were maybe climbing corporate rungs in a way that was more expected, or was that just not something you did?
No, because I just think that's so batshit. I just think it's so mental, this kind of corporate world. Like, it feels so inhumane to me and so unnatural. So to me, I think that's the ludicrous thing. For me, nothing makes more sense than to return to nature, and to really slow down. So with the flowers, you know, I found the kind of flowers taking off, but very quickly I, you know, can burn myself out so quickly with the flowers. It's such physically hard work. If, you know, and when the budgets are small, which they often are, and they have been since COVID, you know, it's you have to have like smaller teams, and they want, you know, so much from you. And it's taken me a long time to not be that person who just like goes, yes, I will deliver something to 200% at, you know, the cost of my soul and make this so perfect for you. I realized very quickly, like, flowers are not going to be the only thing for me. They can't be. And I have to find other ways to make money, but also just to live, because I'm not a single person. I'm much more polymathic in the way that I live. You know, I love writing music and painting and drawing. And so, you know, part of that, having the shepherd's hut back at home, was about to have a little space of my own it doesn't have a loo or a shower, but it does have a bed and a little kitchenette. But a little space where I can sit and put my phone in a box. You know, I've got a little timer lock box, which I can, you know, lock away for hours on end, and just, you know, be that little kid watching the natural world again and write and draw. To me, that feels like the ultimate success. I feel like I found a little dream in that one little room, but also so fortunate to have a foot still in the city because I love the city. I've got so many friends here and it's so alive and exciting, and I think I need both somehow in my life. Always. The balance.
I think people struggle to figure out, how can I be multitudes in a system that really is only really geared to help you have a personal brand that does one thing. And so I think Instagram has been a really good tool for you to express all of these different parts of yourself. And so my questions are, how did Instagram and the content of that come into play? Because it's how I found you. And do you see it now as still as a place of creative freedom and inspiration and a way of getting yourself out there? Or do you see it as a bit of a cage in its kind of algorithmic requirements?
So, I've kind of spoken about how, I suddenly discovered flowers, but I also started to draw again, and I started to write again. And, I found myself during lockdown at home, and whilst I was going off into the woods, I was kind of almost having this kind of second coming out where I had started seeing a therapist and was having these conversations about what it meant to be a gay man, and realized I'd not kind of fully realized myself as a gay man, and wanted to have these conversations with my family about what it means to be gay. And they were just so terrified of that, and terrified of like talking about really, the thing beneath the thing, the thing at the heart of, difficulties we experience in the family, the real truth of the conversation. And so I would go off into the woods, and I would find myself genuinely kind of using the trees as a sounding board to, God, this is a really roundabout story to how I got into Instagram, but I'll get that. Okay. Using the trees as sounding boards, therapizing myself with these big, beautiful, ancient things that have watched me my entire life and know me incredibly well. These kind of almost like grandparent type figures to me. Or at least that's how I view them, these big old oak trees. And I started kind of writing and drawing, and I kind of found this story beginning to emerge about my childhood and about, my life, and kind of this return to nature. And I suddenly realized, wait, I think this is really, really beautiful, and this should be a book. I think this could be a book. So I kind of borrowed away, and I kind of really, whilst I always thought that flowers were like above ground, of my reawakening, and beneath the ground, like beneath the soil, in amongst the roots, was this story, this book that I was creating. And it was kind of amazing. It became a fable, and it's an illustrated fable. And I called it Queer by Nature at the time, which was never really a name I loved because it didn't feel like it represented the book. But it felt strategic. I finished the book, and then I sent it out to loads of agents, and I heard nothing. And I heard nothing, and I was,
because they were like, "Who are you?"
Completely, they're like, "Who the hell are you? You don't have an Instagram." Or I did have Instagram, but I was just like me and my friends, and and months went by and nothing. And then suddenly I had this email where it was like, "Hi, love the book. Can I see the full manuscript?" Within a week, I suddenly had 7 offers from agents, and it was so overwhelming. It's like crazy. And then a few days later, I signed with an agent, and a few days later, the book went out to publishers. And I immediately got a publishing deal in the Netherlands and in Germany. It then kept on going to British publishers, who I received these wonderful gushing emails from people saying, "This is so beautiful, what a profound book. And I'd love to, I would love to take this on, going to take it to acquisition meetings." And the way that books are acquired in the UK versus Europe are very different. And in the UK, you have to get the entire publishing house team on board. And so what would happen is they take it to these internal meetings. And then all the money men, the kind of business heads, the kind of finance people, these, men in suits, as I always saw them, would, look at the book and say, this is a very expensive book to make because it's on brown paper and it's color illustrations. And who the hell is this guy? Like we don't see any of his work online. He's not like an illustrator. And so they were basically like, you need to grow your social media. And then that came back over and over again for months. I felt so embarrassed because I was like, at the beginning I jokingly said, I'm going to be the guy who's got a publishing deal and like, I'm not going to be able to read my own book. And then like, 2 years on, I am that guy. And I'm so incredibly proud of that. It's so remarkable, but it's so amazing. If it's not the outcome that you'd sort of dreamed of, you then see it as this crazy failure, which is so mad.
Because it was published in 2 other languages, not English.
Totally, which is so mad because that's amazing, like so remarkable. And those books are so beautiful. And I got to go and do my, book launch in Amsterdam, and then it came out in Germany. And, I'm able to be so incredibly proud of it now. But at the time I felt so embarrassed and like I'd failed. And so, this kept coming back to me, get on Instagram, make it. And so I did, and I sort of slogged away at it. And I suddenly found this way, I'm quite good at, creating a story and a video and editing it together and putting it out there into the world. And but also, it's so hard. I also find it so incredibly hard. Like I can do the actual process of doing it, but it's so hard constantly having to share yourself with the world. And it wasn't something I naturally had wanted to do. As much as I loved, being on camera as a child and, making music videos and that kind of thing.
You were acting.
I was, yeah, exactly. And I didn't like putting yourself up, for the scrutiny of everyone to deem very simply with a like or not, whether what you're doing is of value or not.
How are you able to do it then? Do you see it as personal brand? I have to for my work, it's my portfolio. Or have you realized like, wow, there's actually an audience that likes what I share and I'm helping people. And there is an entire community in this space.
That's definitely the driver. Like it feels so wonderful when you get these wonderful responses from people who feel you brightened their day by your video. It is a lovely feeling. But I do find it really hard, and because they say you should be posting 3 times a week or whatever. Like I just can't do that. And I'm not very good at being consistent. But when I'm in it, I'm fully in it. And I really, for me, it feels like there's no point doing it if what I'm doing is not going to bring a lot of value to the viewer. So it's not something I've figured out yet at all. Kind of far from, but when it's good, it's a wonderful thing, and then it's also a complete drain and a complete bore. But it is a real force for good in the world, as much as it is a force for bad. I remember someone once saying, the world is getting better and better and worse, faster and faster. And it's so true. I think it's, a double-edged sword.
Are there any other societal or cultural things that you think are holding you or us back from being ourselves?
Yes. The need to be one thing, which we've touched upon. I think we are multitudes. We contain so many different things. We're like trees with so many limbs and branches to ourselves. And yet, social media has got better, but for so long it's really benefited the specialist, the person who does the one thing. But I think, there are those people, and I'm really envious of the people who are that. But for me, it's been about allowing myself to be polymathic, allowing myself to delve into all of the things that I'm curious about. I found flowers, and old me would have flogged myself until I could no longer do the flowers and had to find the next thing. But instead, what I've realized is it's a sort of portfolio. Like it's going to be a portfolio career. It's lots of different things. And I think society really admires that, but it finds it very difficult to compute it at the beginning. Once someone's established, it's like, wow, how did you do that? But it finds it really unsettling that someone wants to pursue multiple things.
I think someone described it to me once as like so much of our life is built on our current system, which is binary, zeros and ones.
Totally.
And so you got to be a 0 or a 1.
Totally.
Like, we're not building lives on systems that are designed for more than 2 options. And so you have to be quite uniform. And when I thought about it like that, you start to realize like how much of our life and society and being human is trapped into binary and this zeros and one idea. And it's very hard to break out of that. On the kind of reverse question, having spent so much time in nature, let's say in your cabin in the woods, what are like the 3 things that you really learn from spending so much deep kind of listening and contemplative time in nature?
I mean, stopping. You watch an animal, like a dog, let's say, like Ben, he will just stare at the trees for hours. This is our sheepdog, who's absolutely terrified of sheep, but loves trees. I mean, everyone says he's looking for squirrels, but I've never once seen a squirrel in the tree that he's staring at. So, I mean, he probably, is searching for movement, but he goes into this Zen-like trance, and it's so peaceful watching him. And, never do we allow ourselves to do nothing. And it's mad that we've constructed this entire world where we're all just running around desperately trying to survive. And it's so exhausting, socially, in our work, like literally every part of society is set up to be exhausting. And then you look at the natural world, you walk into the wood and it's still and it's quiet and it's the wind through the trees. Everything is moving, everything is alive. But it's so gentle rhythmically. So yes, stillness is definitely one of the things. I think that the baseline is joy. You feel it in the natural world, that the kind of like the baseline energy is, there is just joy and kind of love and a good feeling. And so trying to bring that good feeling into one's own life, trying to find that baseline of joy, really look at things, really examine things, because the more you look at nature, the more it will sort of reciprocate back. It enjoys you watching it, and it will put on a kind of play and display. The longer you watch, nature feels you watching her, and she wants to dazzle you and sparkle you. So, show, put on a little show for you. Which we normally go, okay, right, yes, that's that's an oak tree. Yeah, clock, right. Oh, there's some moss. Yeah, clock, walk. We don't go and just watch and admire the soft subtlety of the way the oak leaves are moving or shimmering, or the light just dancing. And the longer you look, the more you see, and you look deeper and deeper and deeper, and nature loves to be looked at. And so it's the slower we can go, I think the planet would be so grateful.
What are the things that still keep you creatively inspired?
There's no one thing, it's, for me, it's following what I'm curious about, over and over. Curiosity is the key to inspiration. At the minute, I'm really fascinated by lanterns. And so I made this hot air balloon at the Garden Museum, this big, beautiful kind of canvas. Actually, when you said, what is my work, the one thing that represented my work, I should have said the hot air balloon, because that was, I called it Flowers Will Take You Where You Need to Go. And it was very much about my story of discovering flowers. And I painted it with 19 silhouettes of the wildflowers and plants from the woods next to my mum and dad's. It was the theme of that year at the Garden Museum was Cecil Beaton's garden party. And I'd visited Cecil Beaton's house in Wiltshire, Reddish House, and it's had this wonderful cloud topiary, this amazing clouds, cloud hedging. And so it was kind of an homage to that, this big kind of stretched canvas hot air balloon. And it was whilst I was kind of painting that, I was terrified of painting. I was suddenly like, oh, painting's quite fun. Oh, maybe I should get into painting. So now I'm actually, I've now entered a period where painting is really fascinating suddenly to me. For so many years I thought painting, bit stressful, like not really my gig. I'm not a painter. And now suddenly I'm completely obsessed with and inspired by paint and the process of putting paint onto canvas or paper or wood and mixing it and the consistency of it. This year, I'm giving myself a year of painting experimentation. And lanterns are somehow featuring in that as well. Because what I realized with this hot air balloon is that I could illuminate it. It was such a shame that I didn't get to illuminate it there because it was all during the day. It was during daytime that people could see it. So it was kind of pointless, but it was kind of amazing because I met Queen Camilla appeared and it felt like a real triumphant moment, the hot air balloon. That really felt like this is me.
What did Camilla think?
I was standing there on the stage, like waiting for her to come out, and everyone's there, like all lined up in their kind of suits, all their best. Everyone's very excited. There's kind of nervous, excited energy within the museum. And she kind of went round and she looked at one of the other exhibitors' work, and then another person. And then she went into this like side room where there was an exhibition on Cecil Beaton. And I thought she'd just be, 5-10 minutes, but like 20 minutes went by and I'm sort of standing there and I knew I was kind of next. And I suddenly had this very dry mouth and I was like, I need water. And I was like, and actually I need the loo. And then I was like, I think I'm going to faint. I was like, I feel so dizzy because I spent the day before I'd been slogging away making this thing because it was the royal opening. And suddenly, just as I was like, oh, would you grab me some water? She came out the doors. So he didn't bring the water and I was standing there thinking, oh my God, what am I going to say? Is it mom or ma'am? Or, it's ma'am rhymes with ham. And then suddenly out she comes out the doors with all of these like bodyguards and like camera people all walking down like this long church towards me in the museum. And my mouth was so dry. And then she kind of walks up to me with this lovely grin on her face and she goes, I love your balloon. And then I just felt so disarmed by how charming she was. And then we just chatted about her garden and about, the balloon and about Wiltshire where she spent so many years and about, her favourite plants. And I'd used lupins these orange lupins with a flame inside the basket. And we talked about her lupins and her foxgloves. And she was just so down to earth and really very, very lovely person. And it put me so at ease. So yeah, it was an amazing, amazing moment.
I love that.
Yeah.
But, also just made me think there that like, we've said like it's hard to be multitudes and it's difficult, but actually I think what you've achieved is to find what Simon Sinek calls a meta-narrative. Like actually if you have a bigger umbrella idea of who you are, I think in our society with, LinkedIn and stuff, people think it has to be a job like entrepreneur, florist, set designer, like very specific and you have to just do that. But who said so? And actually he describes his meta-narrative and what he puts on his badge when he's at a conference is optimist. He's like, you can't take that away from me. If you're an athlete and you have an injury, who are you? Right? So he's like, optimist you can't take away from me. Optimist is something I put into everything. And so having this like meta narrative of this like umbrella idea for you that is like artist or curious natural mind or whatever you want it to be, then actually all of the things that you do, the portfolio career sits under
100%
one thing.
So true. Yeah. That's definitely how I'm living my life now. Totally.
One thing that we always love to get tips on this show is slowing down in your day-to-day. I completely understand like the benefits of spending prolonged times in nature and all of those things and actually spending time at your home there. But when you are in London and things are busy and you have to make decisions or it's a really hectic day, there's a lot going on, team to manage, are there like 3 small things that you do in your day-to-day?
I am a Vedic meditator. So I meditate twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. Sometimes I miss the afternoon if the day is really busy, but I will always do the morning without fail. For 20 minutes. So that for me has been very, very I've been a meditator for 7 years. So that's been a very, core part of what I do, core part of slowing me down. But something that I do when like I'm feeling so frazzled and the day has just rushed away with me is just going for a walk. I mean, it's so simple, but just walking around the block in London, you know, walking down the streets. If you can get 20 minutes walking, and when you walk, it's not just a walk and just, you know, muddle over all the stuff you're worrying about, you know, walking and looking at the world around you. If there are trees, amazing, looking at the trees, you know, walking slowly. And another thing just to slow down is just when you suddenly start noticing that you're, you know, being a bit clumsy, you're like dropping things are just slightly off kilter, just stop everything. Nothing needs to be done that quickly, you know, just stop, take a deep breath. And okay, now can I say this one? Because I think this is the best thing. Putting your hand on your chest and just slowly, you know, just slowly stroking it. I was taught this in therapy, and oh my God, this helps with my anxiety all the time and just brings me back into my body rather than being up here. I just settle. So I'd say that is the easiest, quickest thing that we can all do at any point.
Are there any particular flowers that you think are more calming to have in the home or around?
I think I love branches, you know, beech branches, green leaves. For me, wafty green branches are the most calming, because flowers, you know, they're so beautiful, but they die quicker than the leaves, you know, and I love flowers, but I'm more of a foliage boy. I love just like, you know, the green stuff.
I love that. And the last question that we ask everyone is, if I had to watch a movie or read a book or go see a piece of art or go to a particular place that would help me understand you better, what would it be and why?
So I had a song. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a song called Lifeboat Lovers Rock by the Penguin Cafe Orchestra. Do you know it?
Not as a name, but maybe I've heard it.
It's been such a like significant song for me. It's like helped me through so many moments of transition in my life. It's got this like wonderful kind of momentum to it, but it's also kind of jaunty, and it's sort of got this slightly like, I don't know, rhythmically it doesn't quite land on the notes. So it's got this sort of slightly strange, imperfect quality to it. And yet it moves along with this kind of charming flow, and it sort of somehow feels melancholic. It's sort of somehow got a lot of sadness, but it also feels so hopeful as well. And, you know, if I were to have like a theme tune of those moments of transition in my life, it would be that, with, you know, perhaps maybe a kind of disco moment, you know, in there somewhere, because I love a little boogie. But yeah, I'd say that song is really, yeah, represents a lot for me. The
duality, the like two things can be possible in one.
Totally. And it's like, and there's this wonderful cello within it, and this clarinet. It opens with this very like quite soft and quite like mournful clarinet, but then it steps into this hopeful, uplifting like rhythm. And yeah, that how something that is imperfect can suddenly kind of work. And, you know, perfection has held me back a lot in life. And so I like the fact that it kind of moves forward, and it's not quite right, but it's able to move forwards because it isn't quite fully right, if you know what I mean.
Thank you so much, Rollo. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Tiana.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. This episode was hosted and created by me, Tiana Tambridge, produced by Lulu Goad, sound and video production, and recorded at Brazen Studios, cover art designed by Natalia Ruhe. This season was sponsored by Kione. Please subscribe to The Slowdown to be notified of upcoming episodes, tell a friend, and please leave a review. It really does help a new podcast like this get out there in the world. And remember, we're all heading to the same destination, and there is no prize for getting there early, so we might as well slow down.